Consider supporting Archaeo-Soup on Patreon for as little as $1 per month. Link available in the video description. Thank you.
Questions of Doom.
Hello and welcome back to another
Questions of Doom.
In this series, as ever, I attempt to answer questions that you send my way using the archaeosoup@gmail.com email address, as displayed on the YouTube channel homepage, but as you'll also see at the end of this video. In answering these questions by video, it is my fond hope that the answer is not only useful to the person who's asked the question, but also anyone else out there who may be wondering the same thing. And it is, folks, that time of year when there are many other people out there wondering a very similar thing, a very similar question and topic. Between June and September, that kind of time of year, we are normally inundated with a certain type of questions from people who are just finishing or just about to finish high school, questions from people who are just going into university, or people who maybe are just about to have a gap year, people who are wondering what topics they should choose in their final high school years or in their early archaeological degree years, or in their gap years, what they should do to basically bolster their chances of becoming an archaeologist. And therefore, I have actually answered lots of these types of questions in previous years, and I'll link to those videos below. This year, I've chosen a particular email to respond to, and if this response doesn't touch on your particular query or quandary, check out the previous year's email responses or video responses, and hopefully, in totality, one of those videos will help with your particular query. But before I dive into today's question of doom, it's worthwhile touching on two little tips. And I suppose there's maybe some Muzak would be good at this point. Okay, there we go. Yeah, that's good. Tip number one. There's been a theme this summer that I've noticed in the emails, where people try to deploy a sort of self-deprecating sense of humour, and frankly I do that all the time as well, but it could backfire quite badly, in so much as there are lots of people who begin their email with a variant of, so I have like no idea what I want to do with my life, no clue at all, and I thought I'd just fall back on archaeology. Can you help me? I understand where you're coming from. I understand. In so much as we all have that sense at one point or another of sort of hurtling through life, you know, and before you know it, you're being asked to make important decisions, and you're not quite ready necessarily. You don't really know necessarily if you want what you want to do, or if you want to do the thing that your parents want you to do. This kind of thing. I understand, and in that sense, what you're doing is you're presenting like I say, a slightly self-deprecating description. But you run the risk of insulting the person that you're contacting. I'm not insulted, but if you were to, for example, use the same sort of humour with a surgeon, or with another archaeologist, or with you know, well, anyone, frankly, psychologists, bin men, you know, optometrists, you run the risk of giving them the impression that you think that they have simply settled for their career, as opposed to actually choosing it themselves. So just be careful how you use that particular angle in your email contacts, and also especially in your job applications. Just be very aware of that, just in case. Point number two is people seem to assume that everyone else has it sorted, and this is something that affects people in high school, in university, and in adult life. We all look at other people and we presume that they are blithely gliding through life. Nothing is affecting them. They know exactly where they're going. They have it all sorted out, and it's life's good for them. But for me, life is just chaotic and just unpredictable. I've got no clue what's going on. I've got to work really hard, and don't presume that other people have life sorted out. I mean, I made a little note here just saying it may look like everyone else has it all figured out, but they don't. Things change, crucially. And also crucially, most of the most interesting people that I know still don't really have it sorted out. Still don't really know exactly what they're doing next. Frankly, I don't know exactly what I'm doing next. It's something that I'm going to be tackling soon, is what I want to, what I want to do next with Archaeo-Soup, for example. So it's okay. It's okay to be asking these questions. You're thinking, what am I doing? Where am I going next? Especially when you're sort of, 18, 19, 20, 17, 18, 19, 20. It's fine. Just, relax and don't presume other people have it sorted, because we don't. We definitely don't. So, on to the particular question of doom for today. It goes as follows. Dear Mr. Soup, I am currently a prospective archaeology student in grade 12, South Africa. So, presumably the end of high school. And also a prospective, I like that. It makes me think of an old-time gold rush prospector. But I know what you mean. I'm hoping for a bit of guidance and perhaps a bit of bolstering with regards to my limited degree. Now, I've heard that before, and I'm hoping this isn't like your parents or someone saying, don't do that, it's a limited degree, it's rubbish. Because actually, I've talked about in previous videos how archaeology is a tremendously variated career path, or it can lead into almost anything, because we spend our time reconstructing worlds. Archaeology actually is a really good basis for all manner of careers, so hopefully that's not the case. Allow me to explain. She says, the degree I have applied for is a Bachelor of Arts general degree at an internationally acknowledged university. But seeing as it is a general degree, it doesn't offer me much archaeological specialisation. I have to specialise in 2 core subjects in my final and/or honours year, one of them being archaeology and some other subject. This means I don't have the privilege of solely studying archaeology and specialising in a time period or subdivision thereof in my bachelor's. Would you consider this a setback? If so, how would I be able to combat it? I have considered specialising in archaeology and a language, perhaps such as ancient Hebrew or Latin, to give me a fighting chance, since I would like to work and complete a master's abroad. Would you consider this a wise move? Do you have any tips as to how to better my situation? I'd be ever so grateful to hear from you. Kind regards, Courtney. P.S. I've been a fan of your channel for a while, and I appreciate all the effort you put into it. Thank you. Thank you very much, Courtney. Thank you. Well, you ask, thankfully, you're not asking a question about whether or not archaeology is a limited degree. As I say, I have answered that previously, but also it's good to hear that you have some confidence in the potential for this degree. But I would say that actually my answer is going to be very simple, and that is to say, I think you're fine. I think you're absolutely fine, and you shouldn't be too worried. Now, let me explain. I started my degree as joint honours Arch and Anth. So archaeology and anthropology in the UK, they're separate topics, unlike in, for example, the US. And therefore, I explicitly was studying a delineation between the living and the dead, basically. So in anthropology, we had an extended introduction in the first year to the evolution of the human species. And then that was moving into concepts such as family connections, altruistic behaviour, giving of gifts, social structures, this kind of thing. And then on the other side of things, in archaeology, I was also studying human evolution and some of these similar theories, but in the context of the dead. And I very quickly realised that not only was I doubling up on ideas, but also actually, to be honest, I much preferred working with the dead, because at that point in anthropology, certainly in my university, there was a few conversations occurring at the same time around whether or not it was okay to, for example, describe a particular culture in a particular way for fear of boxing them in or insulting them and this kind of thing. It was sort of, I suppose you might say, politically correct questions that were happening, and they're absolutely the right questions to ask. But at that point, I wasn't interested in answering them. I wanted to get a grounding in anthropology and archaeology before I started wondering whether or not it's okay to describe these people as hunter-gatherers when actually there's an element of arable, nomadic lifestyle to their society. I was much more interested in applying some of these questions to data sets that we cover in archaeology, because it seemed simpler to me. In other words, I zeroed in on what you've described as the privilege of studying archaeology. But I also realised by the end of my degree, especially when it came to write my dissertation, that I needed a bit extra as well. This isn't the case for most archaeology students, I imagine. But I decided to write a particularly complex dissertation that required a basic knowledge of psychology. I sort of ended up studying that in textbooks up to like a first or second year level at university. Engineering, architecture, social theory and structure, philosophy. There are all these different ideas that I had to get a good grounding in order to do my dissertation properly in my third year. Now, granted, not all undergraduate courses have a dissertation after 3 years. Some are maybe 3 years and then a fourth extra year where you do a dissertation. I'm not quite sure what the structure of your course is, but I learned that by the end of that undergraduate course, that a bit extra was a good thing. Now, I'll come back to that in just a moment. That said, though, a good general knowledge of archaeology is also a good thing. You describe your degree as possibly limited because you're being almost sort of forced not to be a specialist. You can't hone in on a particular period or era of interest. But actually, I would argue that's a good thing, and most undergraduate archaeology courses are in fact designed to give you a grounding in archaeology from different times, different places, and from different perspectives on those times and places, so that you have actually, if not only a good understanding, a good basic understanding of how history evolved and changed in different places, but also you're able to describe why it is that we're able to characterize, say, the Neolithic in Europe as being a particular thing, because you're able to compare it to, say, the Neolithic in the Levant, or, for example, in places in Africa. You can have that compare and contrast, I suppose, is what I'm getting at, understanding of archaeology, and therefore a generalized education in your first years of archaeological education is definitely a good thing. It's the reason why most degrees are structured along those lines. And frankly, if someone is out there who is in an archaeology degree that's encouraging them to specialize early, you will focus on Neanderthals from week 1 or from week 2, then that's a bad course, I would argue. That's not only a bad degree course, but also a bad course for your career. A bit of exposure, even to archaeology that you're not interested in, for example, Romans, is a good thing, because it helps you. It helps you to understand why you can say what you can say about the things that you are wanting to specialize in eventually. So that's not a limiting factor at all. However, going back to my dissertation experience and having a bit extra being a good thing, I would say that the fact that you are able to, and in fact the fact that you have to have this joint approach in your degree, is possibly a good thing, and likely a very good thing. And I think you're on the right track in terms of Hebrew or Latin. If you're wanting to go, for example, into Holy Land archaeology, that's very, very good in particular. You could, for example, look at philosophy. You could look at social theory. You could look at almost anything, I imagine. I don't know quite how your course structure can be plugged together. But if there's pottery, if there's a course or a module or something that you can plug into your degree that will give you a hint of specialization, or maybe will add some extra context to your archaeological education, then go for it without a doubt, definitely. And in some respects, my degree, as much as it's a very well respected degree and a very good degree, I had to season it a bit at the end with some extras in order to make it a bit more tasty, a bit more exciting for me. And so the fact that actually that you, as part of the structure, are being encouraged to try some hot sauce with your chili, or to try, you know, a zucchini with your cucumber. Are they the same thing, zucchinis and cucumbers? Okay, a carrot with your cucumber is a good thing. So definitely not a limiting factor. And so therefore I wouldn't say, could you ask for tips on how to better your situation? I wouldn't say that you necessarily have to do anything by the sounds of it. It sounds as though you're on a good track. It sounds as though you have a clear sense of wanting to be an archaeologist. And it sounds as though you're already thinking about how all this stuff will plug together and how it will impact you as an archaeologist as well. So even if it's not a formal aspect of your education, if you feel that you would like to know more about a particular aspect, osteoarchaeology for example, then reach out to someone who studies bones and talk to them. Have these conversations as well, because you've also got to remember that in addition to the formal degree, there's also your growth as a person and as an archaeological specialist or generalist, as someone who wants to give your learning context. Actually, just everyday conversations are a good idea, and that applies if anyone out there is thinking about having a gap year, or if you're doing a sandwich course where you have, you know, intense education, period of sort of work in the field, intense education. In that period in the middle, when arguably you have a little more free time, always think about who would I like to talk to, what would I like to learn more about, what would be an interesting skill to learn, what would be a fun skill to learn. Never stop being curious about how you can add to that tapestry. And eventually it won't just be a career path outcome that you're thinking about, it'll also be a more rounded sense of you as a person. Because I think, as with most career paths that are driven by a particular passion and knowledge, they often become fairly indistinguishable from you and your personality as well. And so in my case, I try to talk to people who I want to learn more from, or who just intrigue me, or frankly people who I disagree with. If I really don't understand why on earth does that person believe in multi-regional evolution, what's going on there, talk to them. And you won't necessarily have your mind changed, but you'll definitely have another aspect of that context to your studies that will make you a better and more rounded archaeologist and human being, dare I say. So hopefully, Courtney, that's been a useful answer to your question, and hopefully it hasn't been too disappointing, in so much as you're saying, is this a wise move? How can I better my situation? I think you're doing everything you need to, everything you can. And so long as you're maintaining that awareness of what's going on around you, I'm sure you'll be fine. And also good luck to you as well. Thank you for getting in touch. If anyone else out there has any thoughts, comments, questions or ideas, please do comment below, add to the conversation. Perhaps if you have a better sense of the particular elements that might be affecting a student in South Africa, please do comment below as well, because again, I know from country to country, as I say, things like, say, if and when you do a dissertation can be completely different. So please do add to this conversation if you think that I've missed something. But again, thank you so much, Courtney. And also, if you're thinking, that hasn't answered my question, do check out the other video links below, and hopefully your question will be answered in one of those. As ever, guys, until next time, do take care. Bye-bye.